Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Alexandre GARABEDIAN. I'm the editor of French media LAGARDE. I'm very pleased to have you for this almost post-COVID financial forum of Paris Europlace. We'll be discussing this afternoon in this session the financing and funding of corporates in Europe. Not so much blue chip companies, but more startups, and how the financial ecosystem in Paris and in Europe is helping startups to become scale-ups, and then scale-ups to grow and remain in Europe. There have been a string of announcements in the last few weeks, especially in Paris, on the tech leaders. We'll be discussing that also. But where do we stand now with respect to the funding of corporates? What is left to be done? Our guests will answer these questions today. I'm pleased to welcome Delphine, your Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Euronext Paris. Standing next to you, Pascal LAGARDE, Executive Director at Bpifrance, in charge of international affairs, strategy, development, and research. And Alain, your Chief Executive Officer of the European Investment Fund. And we'll start with you, Pascal LAGARDE, because you co-authored last year a report called the Bourdillon-Lagarde report on French unicorns going public. And I'd like to know what problems had to be fixed for unicorns to go public, to list in Paris, and to remain listed in Paris.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much. Do you hear me? Yes, okay. Thank you very much, and very happy to be there. And hello to everyone. Yes, so what we did in 2021 was coming from something we saw in our portfolio in Bpifrance, that there was a big chunk of very large possible unicorns coming, and these unicorns were in different sectors, from the IT platforms to biotech, including green techs and industrial startups. And we counted at that time something like 30 to 35 companies that could be deemed to list somewhere. So some of them will have M&A and some of them would list. And we were quite unhappy with the possibility that there would only be an idea of listing in NASDAQ. That was something we didn't like a lot, because a lot of public money was there, and they would lose all their, I would say, European roots. So we studied what could be done, and at that time we proposed a few possibilities. The first one was to have an equivalent of NASDAQ in Europe, and we discussed a lot with Euronext, and we thought about a possible compartment, tech premium, we called it at that time. Secondly, the idea was to have a non-financial support for these large companies before they would be IPO'd, long before, to understand what it would be, how it could be done, and after, because they should learn too, to promote good research on that field, which is not always the case. Structure an ecosystem of financing these companies in France, continuum between private equity to public equity, which is quite uneasy because these are two ecosystems that really don't speak together. Then try to increase the amount of money available for IPOs or crossover or scale-ups. And then finally have a European vision on that. So that's what we've done.
And how does the Euronext Tech Leaders Initiative answer these issues? Delphine.
Thanks. Yes, I think we participated in preparing the report and interacting with Pascal and Christophe Bourdillon, and together also with a group in Europlus. And it really was about, it's a marketplace, it's as strong as the weakest link we have. So the idea was to play on different levels. And so there's something about research, this idea of having the two universe meeting together in advance, etc. But the role the Euronext could play really was to provide the meeting point and the visibility, the poster visibility, I would say, of the company, so that we would create a cluster and a positive loop of attraction, development, etc., of listing. We were very, very interested that the proposal put to us was to create, at the time the name was a compartment, at the pan-European level. And that's important because we are Euronext, we are pan-European. We now federate 7 markets. So the historic founders were France, Belgium, the Netherlands, then Portugal, but more recently joined by Dublin, Oslo, and even more recently, last year, Milan. So that's 7 markets. It represents 25% of the trading of equities and a global market cap of a little less than 6 trillion euros. So that's, to give you some references, it's twice the LSE market cap, aggregated market cap, and 3 times Deutsche Börses. So that's what we are, and what was interesting from the French marketplace was to say we want to have companies listing in Paris, and we recognized it has to be in a European endeavor. So the idea that was put to us and that we really took also inspired by the experience, one experience which is a star segment in Italy, was to identify a segment to put really under the spotlight the companies who are devoted to tech and growing. Initially, we had the idea of concentrating that to a certain level of company, above a certain level, until a certain level, because the initial idea was to say let's focus on companies that need the intention. But then we reflected and said Nasdaq doesn't have a cap, and essentially a big part of the performance is actually the GAFAs, and it's, my advice is always to take that into account when you compare if you want to go there. I mean, a big part of the performance is not actually the mid caps. But coming back to our business, we decided to really focus on the companies that would join and what we can provide them: visibility, coaching, exposure, contacts with the buy side. And that is for the companies already listed and for the candidates, for those in the private, on the private side who are prospects 1, 2, 3 years before, and to respond to what you say, which is two different universe, with the private side saying the public side does not understand the business model and they're too shy and they're too conservative, etc. And the public side saying, okay, you may be too shy, but maybe you don't take into account the way we see the world, etc. So having that place to meet. So we launched it. And we launched it with the support of partners, especially in France. I must say there was a big support there, and but we also have global and partners from other countries. And so we announced 110, and since it was 108, and now it's 110 companies, because we have 2 listed companies who've joined recently on the 7 markets. For France, it's 42, and they cover different sides of tech, and they go from 300 market cap to ASML, Dassault Systèmes, Téléperformance, Capgemini, etc. So the big names. And we also want the big names to be coaching the smaller ones. Because one of the, I'll finish there because I see I've taken my time, but one of the elements that there has been a lot of attention from the public sector, namely the officials, etc., on developing the private side, which is quite important because we needed those companies to grow and not unroot themselves early on. But we shouldn't think that because a company is listed, they don't deserve attention and coaching, because not everyone is at the top of the CAC 40. And so we need to develop that investor base, and this is what we have received. So the partners in France are Caisse des Dépôts, Bpifrance, La French Tech, who will no longer have, the first definition of La French Tech was initially you have to be non-listed. Okay, but why? You're still a French tech if you're listed. And so they now take into account and will give visibility to our tech, our French tech, listed tech. And we also have a number of buy side, including, for instance, Amiral Gestion, who have already mentioned that they will create some special funds for linked to the initiative. So this is an ecosystem we're creating, and hopefully we do that at a time where it's a more challenging environment, and that's why it's important to do it now.
Yes. Do you fear that the pool of IPO investors and equity investors will shrink after the violent correction we're experiencing this year?
In 2 minutes, and I don't have a crystal ball, but short term, there's been a correction. I don't give any advice or whatever; it's not my job. But there's been a rotation, and so that's it. It's normal that companies will take time and try to find the best timing. So strategically, the new normal, I would say, of money. Meaning something, value of money changing a little bit, will, I think, will make public markets and equity public markets even more important, because there will need to be exits. That will be important for the private sector, the private side, to show that exits are a possibility. Of course, there is always M&A, but not only. And this is the place where you have the permanent liquidity. And I think we will. So strategically, I'm super optimistic. But of course, it will take the time to adjust to the new situation.
Okay, Pascal. One of the feature of this initiative is to build a club of Cornerstone Investors. Why is it so important?
Well, that's part of what we said, Delphine and me, is about the fact that there is a kind of wall between two worlds, and these two worlds are private equity and public equity players. So we try to put them together. We have created this Cornerstone Investor club to have people meet, share good practices, and try to see in advance before IPO nice and very interesting potential investment in the future. And so that's one of the action we launched. We also launched at CDC Group another action, which was to create a specialized IPO Czech fund in CDC Croissance, which is now 300 million euros in capital, and which will be specialized in these tech IPOs in the future.
It's supposed to grow towards 1 billion, 1.5 billion now.
Yeah. So that's only the beginning.
Yeah. Who's in it at the moment?
No investment yet.
Okay.
Yeah, but they are investing on another kind of tool now, and they will transfer their
it's directed towards institutional investors, which will
it will be
invest in this
not only Caisse des Dépôts. And on Bpifrance, and we have a different kind of investment. We are more active investor, direct active investors, with larger stakes and always part of the board. We are increasing also our activity in this field right now. So there is a common and joint activity.
We've touched a little bit the European aspect of this initiative, and Alain GODARD, from a European perspective, how do these announcements fit with what the European Investment Fund is doing? How is it complementary?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, what we observe in Paris and in France is very much what is also observable across Europe. What I mean by this is that 3/4 of our scale-up companies, so startups in a growing phase, are actually refinanced by essentially the American funds and even from funds from Asia. So it's a massive challenge that we are facing, again, not only in France, but across Europe. Therefore, we have decided at European level, but with the great, let's say, support of France and Germany, to create the so-called ScaleUp Initiative. So this ScaleUp Initiative is about injecting into the system about 5 billion of public money and up to another 5 billion of private money. So it would be at the end a public-private initiative, which will aim at supporting or creating about 15 major investment funds able precisely to finance and refinance at a later stage these companies that today are going, let's say, across the Atlantic. So what is proposed here, and again, beyond the initiative itself, it's the issue or the vision is to create a market, obviously. And that's why here today we have other good initiatives that support the idea of having obviously a French market, but obviously also beyond the French market, a European market, whereby we would have indeed not only the investment capacity, and this is the ScaleUp Initiative, but also the let's say the tools. And at the end, what makes a market is, as we all know, the three key criteria, so liquidity, and liquidity. So we have started, and thanks to Euronext, to identify already, let's say, a good benchmark from that point of view. But we need also, as it has been said, to feed this system with additional data, obviously, but also making the market growing. So this is a question of years. It will not happen, I mean, in few months. But the combination of investment, public and private, data, and ultimately quotation will hopefully support companies, and also beyond the companies, the sovereignty of our technology in Europe.
What is actually working? You said 5 billion and public and 5 billion private. Where are we now?
So we are in the making. So on the 8th of February, the member states under the leadership of Paris, under the presidency, has initiated this process. So 22 member states have already signed and supported this initiative. Few of them have already allocated the budget for it. Actually, France and Germany put aside already 1 billion each. And other member states are in discussion. That's precisely my job today, to federate, I mean, all these member states in order to reach the target of up to 5 billion for the public. And then will come the second phase, which is to also attract private investors to join, I mean, this initiative too.
Okay. Is it possible to, you said liquidity is so important, but is it possible to to reach your ambitions when we have the capital markets union that is not working? Europe is fragmented between different markets. The rules are different sometimes.
Yeah, that's precisely why, I mean, we have been convincing the member states to go for this kind of initiative, to precisely address the fragmentation of the market in this segment. And you're right to say that this will not be limited to an investment. It has also to be accompanied by other measures. So stock index is one, but other initiatives in terms of deregulation and also alignment of practices across Europe would also be needed for that.
We've been talking, when I started my career in journalism a few years ago, we were already talking about the European Nasdaq and helping, you know, and there was a ESDAC. It died. What is different today? What would be different this time?
I think this time we understand that we need to do things, let's say, in order. We have been discussing or dreaming about a European Nasdaq for now years, if not decades. It's important that all the elements that will make, I was talking about liquidity before, all the components of a true European market will be there in order to have that market. So we need indeed the three elements that I was mentioning before, and we need also a time for it. But I don't think we should be targeting, let's say, the European Nasdaq before also advocating for more investment, a deeper market, a more, let's say, mature market.
Delphine and then Pascal.
Yeah, just with the same question. I think we should not be too shy of comparison. First, there has not been that big a number of cases of companies going to Nasdaq, and second, more importantly, what is different now is that we do have companies, tech companies with ambition, who want to list, whereas before they would not even start creating that project in Europe, and they would enroute very early on. And you know, we would not even know that they were there, and then you discover that there's a Frenchman somewhere, but that's it. So today it's not the same situation because of a new generation, because also of the role that has been played in nurturing that and enabling this growth in the private side. We also have great companies who are already listed. We just know them less because they're B2B, because they're not new blue chip names in the CAC 40, but that's precisely the role of tech leaders to make them known. And to give an example, we've released the benchmark index of the tech leaders, so Europe-wide, 7 markets of Euronext, 110 companies, at least, you know, with the history, those who were already there. Over 5 years, it's plus 86%, and that's after that's last week, not December 31st last year. And it compares very well with Nasdaq 100, which with the same definition is plus 95%, and you have Facebook, etc. in that. So we do have that growth. We tend to ignore it a little bit, and we can build from there. So that's the difference, I would say, from before. Then we have things to fix. We do have a smaller saving fund, pool. We tend in Europe to have all sorts of incentives for savings to go to non-equity in general. Different from a country to another, but almost the same result. And with the new interest rates, it may even, and in IFRS 9 for insurers, it will be even worse. So that's a problem, because it means that, you know, you have to tap international liquidity, and you already lose a little bit with that. We have problems with research. We've made a mess of with the unbundling, and we have that type of issue. But I think those things can, you know, we have to work on all different elements. And I think we have provided the base for building from there positively. If I remember well, the EIF was announcing also that you would consider investing in the public markets, albeit with a definition of very small entities. But that's a very nice development, because it's also true that a lot of attention again was given to the private side. But if you just give attention to the private side and you let everything go afterwards, then you lose your companies, and that's a pity.
Pascal?
Yes, to insist a little to what you've just said, I think the big difference with ISDAC, the previous ideas were, at that time we had a lot of very, in fact, weak startups, and they were very young, very immature, and even the ecosystem in itself was very immature. We have no returning entrepreneurs, no big successes. That has changed a lot. I mean, after, I would say, 20 years of hard working with NPIs, national promotional institutions like Bpifrance in different countries in Europe, and the role of EIF, the market has been structuring a lot, and we have now something in Europe which is not at the level of the US, you can say that, but which is doing good with a lot. We are producing really structured and companies that are not only there to make, I would say, a very nice financial coup for after 3 years, but that are to be there for years and years. That may be even the new regeneration for industry, because lots of these startups are now on the industrial side, and they're going to produce. They are beginning to produce. And I was speaking with one of the auditor here. We were speaking about a green agricultural company which is already building its third factory. So it's not a small company, and it's still classified as a startup. So they need money to do that. They need a huge amount of money, but they have a huge possible growth also. So it's a good deal, and it's a good deal to go on the markets.
Okay, so the ecosystem is building. There's still much to do, but we'll talk about that also in the second session, which will cover the themes too. Thank you very much, all of you. Delphine, you're staying with us.